Our next presenter is, and you've heard him referred to several times already, Ron Denham. Ron is really Rotary's international coordinator for water projects globally and has held a number of leadership roles with Rotary. He lives in Toronto, but he travels the world, and you just never would know where he is because he's from one water conference to another project, looking after water issues on behalf of Rotary International. He also leads the newly formed Water and Sanitation Rotarian Action Group, and we'll share more with you about that and what the future holds for that. Also, somewhere in the audience, and I didn't tell her I was going to do this, is a person that keeps the Water and Sanitation Action Group running in his absence, and that's Anna Shepard. So you might want to make an opportunity to see her at the Wasrag table outside. And now, Ron Denham.
Thank you very much, Charles, for that generous introduction. District Governor Chris, past district governors, fellow Rotarians, guests, and particularly the Rotarians of District 6290. A big change is taking place in the world of Rotary. And I want to share today with you the implications of those changes, particularly with respect to water and sanitation. Rotary next year, the next 5 years, is going to be very different from the Rotary we're familiar with. And one reason for that is the creation of the Rotarian Action Groups. Heretofore, with the exception of the polio eradication, Rotary has been incapable of implementing any significant program. There was nothing between RI and individual clubs. And individual clubs around the world had great difficulty coming together and ensuring any continuity because of the change in officers each year. A year ago, almost to the day, Rotary International authorized the formation of the Water and Sanitation Rotarian Action Group. Rotary volunteers around the world who have come together and said, our personal mission, our passion is to do something about water. So that is the hat I'm wearing today when I describe and share with you some of the changes that are taking place in the world of water within Rotary. Fortunately, I can keep my talk to the prescribed 20 minutes because Peter has already shared with you these kind of horror stories. Young women and girls who should really be in school, or the women engaged in meaningful economic activity, fetching and carrying water. In some cases, the source of water is nothing more than a mud hole. Or in one of those other pictures, it was a flooded road after the monsoon rains or the periodic rains. And then they carry this jerry can, 20 liters of water, 44 pounds, plus the weight of the can, 50 pounds, for 6 to 12 kilometers, there and back 2 or 3 times a day to support the household. Or early in the morning, the women line up at a stream. And of course, the earlier you get there, the better the chance you have of getting the good water. But the earlier you get there, and we see it frequently, those who get there at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning are liable to be abducted by one of the other tribes in the area, or perhaps taken off by some wild animal, a coyote, or the like. You're familiar with the statistics. I won't waste your time on them. We all know the number of people that lack access to safe water. And also sanitation. Sanitation is the other side of this equation. And the statistics there are even more frightening. And then the diseases. Peter referred to the number of people dying, children particularly. You know, when you think of the number of people dying any day, contrast that with what happens if a plane hits the ground in an untimely fashion and a couple of hundred people are killed. You read about it for the next 2 weeks. There are inquiries that go on for, in some cases, up to 20 years later. And yet, how much attention do those 8,000 people get in our media? We as Rotarians, we as activists, we as advocates need to be reminding our media all the time. And thank goodness for people such as Peter, who are creating the message which the media can use. Economic consequences, equally serious. 40 billion hours spent per year in Africa alone, collecting and carrying water. Think of the economic implications if those people were engaged in some kind of meaningful activity. It could be agriculture. It could be sewing. It could be distributing, delivering goods, and so forth, manufacturing handicrafts and the like. Women and children, and it's usually the girls, spend up to 6 hours a day fetching water instead of being in school. Families often spend up to 25% of their income purchasing water. You know, it's interesting that the poor people of the world pay disproportionately more than we do for water. And it plays a critical role in life and livelihood, population and family stability. When you see those pictures of drought in Africa particularly, and in India to a lesser extent, those people, to seek a livelihood, will abandon those traditional grounds where they've lived and move to the cities. And the consequence in the cities is what we see in places such as Kibera in Nairobi and elsewhere. These urban slums in which there is no quality of life, disease is rampant, but it's the inevitable trend when people leave their home area, their home region, the whole district because of lack of water. Gender equality, environment, and that picture Peter showed about the Aral Sea is a horrendous story, but one we're familiar with. But let's also be very conscious of some of the conditions that are emerging here in North America, where we're depleting aquifers, diverting rivers, and so forth. Education and literacy, human health, reducing conflict. Think of the potential conflict where major rivers go through several countries. Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt all are water stressed. Yet the Nile is the biggest, the largest river in the world. It carries water through all those countries. And yet there are treaties that say how much each country can take from that river. As the populations grow, inevitably there's going to be conflict. The Tigris and the Euphrates rising in Turkey, going through Iraq and Iran. Here again, we see a potential conflict as Turkey creates this huge dam on those rivers, reducing the amount of water available downstream. In the year 2000, the meeting of the various United Nations agencies put together a charter of what is needed to address the issues of the world. And there were several goals, but there was only one goal that achieved unanimous support: reduce by 50% the proportion of people without access to safe water and sanitation. It's reducing by 50%. Now, that's a huge challenge. When we look at some of the statistics, sub-Saharan Africa, 47% lack access. And yet that 47% is an average. If I could be allowed to play a pun, it's like having your head in the fridge and your feet in the stove, but on average you're quite comfortable. Or that other situation where you hear about people drowning in an average of 3 inches of water. Those averages are very deceiving. When we look at Ethiopia, 78% of the people lack access. Even that is an average of urban and rural. In the rural areas, 88% people lack access to safe water. Only 2.4% of the people have access to safe sanitation. This gives you an idea of the dimension. So, the Water Resource Group and the Water and Sanitation Rotarian Action Group endorsed those MDGs. With the president of Rotary for the last 3 years, we've sat down and said, where do you want Rotary to stand on this issue? Do we support it? And the answer is yes, and we articulated these goals. We want every Rotarian, everybody here, to become familiar with the world water issues, both at home and in other parts of the world. The way we're destroying the environment, as in the Aral Sea. Potential conflict. In fact, many of you may know there's a Rotary Peace Conference in Windsor, Detroit in April. One of the topics at that conference is water and peace. I recommend you all think about attending. We want every Rotary club to implement a water and sanitation project and implement major demonstration programs. And I'll come back to that later, because that is where the significant change is taking place in the Rotary world. You and thousands of other Rotary clubs are already involved. And yesterday evening, a few of us were together, and we heard the accounts of how clubs in 6290, District 6380, 6360, and 6400, even though it wasn't represented, are all doing work. And the litany of projects of various kind, biosand filters, wells, pipelines, call it what you will. It is an incredible story, which unfortunately the world has not heard, unfortunately. Those people who travel the world and see what's happening, yes, but the major agencies, many of our communities don't know what we in the world, in Rotary are doing for water. And very often, the rationale for getting involved in a water project is to get a matching grant. In fact, I frequently hear the cart coming before the horse, that somebody says, we need to get a matching grant, we need money, we've put money into the Rotary Foundation, okay, let's create a water project. So they'll then decide to start a Rotary club in another country. This happens, believe you me. I was at a conference in Haiti in December, some of you were there. And the word was that there was a Rotary club in the United States that wanted to get a matching grant. They were going to start a club in Haiti, a Rotary club in Haiti, so that club could then apply for the matching grant. Those of us who are concerned about sustainability can well imagine how unsustainable such an approach would be. Nevertheless, this is the strategy generally. A club decides to do a water project. They scan the list of the clubs seeking help, and here they can go to the Wasrag website. Every week we're posting requests from clubs around the Rotary world seeking help, water and sanitation of any kind. It could be drilling a well, digging a well. It could be rainwater harvesting, which is probably the most sustainable form of rain catchment there is. Then you select a project, you contact the host club, and you go through this process, and hopefully you conclude by submitting a report to the Rotary Foundation, although we know that that last step is the one that's often the most difficult to accomplish. However, this traditional approach, which focuses on small projects, and as you know, the Rotary Foundation is willing to grant up to $5,000. Until a few years ago, they'd grant $2,500 for an international project. It is causing some concerns. First of all, on a small project, can we determine that it's truly sustainable? Is the resource sustainable? If we're putting in some technology, is there a supply chain to bring the spare parts when needed? Is there a technological capability in the community to maintain whatever is put in? And the answer too often is no. Another issue which pertains to sustainability is if we have a limited project, limited scale, limited scope, who is going to spend the time and effort to change the behavior? For example, if we bring in safe water, where are the resources to bring about behavior change? Hand washing, for example, a simple process and yet so important. I've seen many communities where safe water is brought to a village, for example, but the people collecting the water are putting it in dirty utensils, which haven't been washed properly from the previous meal. Or worse still, they've just been to the toilet, they haven't washed their hands, they're now carrying these containers to collect the water. And so it's perpetuated. Behavior change and training is a very important part of any project. Too often, smaller projects cannot carry that resource. Furthermore, it's not satisfying many of our partners. And we find large organizations, Coca-Cola and the like, they don't want the hassle of distributing $10,000 for a project. It's too small. They're not interested in that kind of thing. They want projects, and this applies both to Rotarians as well as to major organizations. They want to have a real impact on the community. In fact, next year's president, D.K. Lee, has adopted for his theme, Make Dreams Real. They want to leverage with major donors, foundations, corporations, and NGOs. They want active involvement. Rotarians are retiring at an earlier age. They're healthy. They want to contribute to changing the world. They want to be involved in a program where they can have a significant impact. And just to illustrate this, some 6 weeks ago, I was approached by a large corporation involved in the soft drink business, and said, we have $6 million. We'd like to put it into a rainwater harvesting run by Rotary. The problem is, Rotary at the present time, with the exception of Wasrag, is incapable of handling $6 million for a rainwater harvesting program. We're too fragmented by and large. A club can't handle it. A district can't handle it. And that's the reality I want to share with you, which has implications for the way we'll go forward. So future success depends on taking a holistic approach. Focus on helping the community, not just supplying water. understand, build on, and adapt to local culture. In other words, we need to be steeped in the lore, the values, and the culture of a community if we are to help them. We don't impose a well on them. We don't say, yes, we're going to bore a well and leave it with you, and yet that is happening all the time. But that's not the way going forward. Involve all the stakeholders, encourage local buy-in and ownership. It implies helping the local community to create a 3 to 5 year vision. Now, I should have said at the beginning when I started this presentation, it was out of date. I put this presentation together some 3 weeks ago, I think, sent it to Jim so he gets it on the hard drive. Since then, I went to Madagascar. I was invited there by the president of that country. And we had a major meeting. We met, first of all, with the Rotary clubs. We met with many of the NGOs, UNICEF, African Development Bank, USAID. We had a preliminary meeting talking about water and sanitation. We met with the president. And we'd seen the outline of the water plan for the country, $112 million between now and the year 2012. And the president looked at 6 of us Rotarians. I was representing Wasrag. We had the current district governor, Charles Fouad, past district governor, and presidents of 2 clubs. The president of Madagascar said to us, Rotarians, I believe you are the only group that can lead this water and sanitation program in this country. So we came out of that meeting, and needless to say, moved very quickly. Each of the 18 clubs agreed to adopt a locality, and right now they're planning what might call a scoping study or a feasibility study, which will cost about $300,000. And then once that is in place, there'll be a series of 18 pilot projects. A pilot project will develop a template, a model for going to the rest of the country. And the pilots will include pipelines, because there are many sources of water remote from villages. It will include wells. It will include rainwater harvesting. And I strongly suspect it will include filtration of one kind or another, because the quality isn't always what's wanted. That gives you an idea of what's happening. I also received, when I got back from Madagascar, a memo from a group of Rotarians in Uganda. They're talking about the Uganda water team. The district governor in Uganda, Chris Mutalia, has said, before any water project goes ahead in this country with Rotary, I want to approve it. I want to make sure that it is part of this holistic approach, not just a well here or latrines in a school. Let's look at it from the country point of view, and then within the country, from the point of view of individual districts or localities. Part of this process means we've got to choose the right technology. We're going to be starting from the community upwards. In fact, I always get a little bit concerned when I hear people in this part of the world talking about our Rotary project. We have a project in Kenya or in the Maasai country. We're doing a project in northern India. We are not doing a project. Those are community projects. And the words themselves mean a lot. It's a mindset. Some of you see the weekly or monthly reports which I send to the president of Rotary. And invariably, I'm reporting on what clubs and districts are reporting to me from around the world. And it's surprising how often a project in a country such as Uganda or Tanzania is referred to as a project from a Rotary club in California. It's wonderful that the club in California is involved in that. But too often that mindset that it's a project of a Rotary club in California means that that club wants to drive that project. They want to make sure it succeeds. They want to make sure those people in Africa have water, whether they like it or not. Start from the community. Start with the community and the Rotary club in that community. Work up to the district, and then decide how you can help. Please, don't go into a country and decide what you're going to do for them. We've seen too many examples on the international scene, to which I don't need to refer anymore, about how we believe we can change the world, despite what people want. So these are some of the things that are necessary. It does apply this new approach for most Rotary clubs. Now, having said this, let me say there will always be room for the individual Rotary club that wants to do its own thing with the Rotary club in country X, Y, or Z. That's been the strength of Rotary. It will not change overnight. It will take a long time. It might take 15 or 20 years. But in the meantime, however, there's this approach towards countrywide, region-wide, district-wide programs. It implies a 3 to 5 year commitment, which of course is more than most Rotary clubs can commit to because the president changes every year, the governor changes every year. This is why Wasrag has been formed, authorized by Rotary International to ensure continuity and consistency. And those of you who were Rotarians in the year 2000 remember that was part of Karl Ravitz's message, continuity and consistency, something which has escaped Rotary for a long time because of the one-year cycles. It requires multi-club and multi-district partnering, not one club to one club, district to district. Alliances with other NGOs. This vision we have is far too great for Rotary alone. And from the very beginning, we need to recognize and bring in all the other NGOs, the international NGOs, the UNICEFs of this world, WaterAid, Water for People, but also the local NGO. And the local NGO in Ethiopia is very often the Orthodox Church. In northeast Kenya, it's the Anglican Church. We want to work with whomsoever is in that community, working at the grassroots level, understanding the people, understanding the culture, and can tell us how to make things work. Most of all, empowering the local community. These are community projects, they're not local projects. And one of the first things we do, maybe it takes the first 6 months of a program, is to help that community take ownership and make the decisions. The linkages which you have through the Water and Sanitation Rotarian Action Group will facilitate this strategy. It'll give you access to the NGOs. You can find out which NGOs are working in any particular area. We're identifying sources of funding, access to resources and expertise. If you want expertise on biosand filter, well, of course, you have that right here. But that will be available on the website. Rainwater harvesting, it's on the website. Bore wells, dug wells, that technology is available if you want to find out how it should be done. And recently, we got a request from Rotarians, how about life straw? Well, we'd heard about life straw. We didn't have an evaluation, so we sent out an all-points bulletin. Fortunately, Mark Subsey was one who replied, yes, this is the definitive statement. So that is now available on the website if somebody's thinking of implementing a life straw project. This is how Wasrag can help you. We're defining best practices. Currently, 3 major task forces are underway. One is on sustainability, just about finished, and that's being led by Carolyn Moob, who's here at this conference. You should talk with her. There's another one on groundwater, dug wells, bore wells, headed by Robert Wabina, a very active member of Engineers Without Borders. Another one on toilets and latrines. This is all there if you decide to move ahead, as well as documentation on training and behavior change. Most important of all, however, the success depends on the attitude towards the partners. That club in Africa is your partner. Treat them as a partner. You know, I often think the only difference between the president of the club in Nakuru, featured on the DVD, Peter has met him, the only difference between him and any one of us is he chose different parents. He happened to be born and brought up in a very different environment. We were more fortunate in some ways. He was more fortunate in other ways. But let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. Let's treat that person as a partner. After all, if we're helping them, they very clearly have to be involved in defining what kind of help they need, how it should be delivered, and so forth. Develop strong personal relationships. Those of us who've been in the business world and have tried to sell in China and other countries know that you don't make a sale on your first visit. You might go over with a trade mission, you meet all the high-priced people and so forth, you shake hands and say, yes, wouldn't it be good to work together? And you come back and say, gee, that didn't lead to anything, didn't get an order, wasted time, wasted money. So you go back a second time. You go back a third time. And eventually they begin to develop confidence that you're for real. You're really interested in helping them. Well, let's treat Rotarians in the other countries the same way. Develop and maintain mutual respect. And ensure free and open exchanges. Let's not bury a problem when it becomes apparent. And It's so easy to do that. We bury the problem, we hope it'll go away. It happens at all levels. It happens in our society. It happens in the public sector. It happens in universities. I know, I've taught that. You know, you bury a problem, you hope it'll go away, or hope nobody will notice. But if something is going to cause a problem, let's bring it to light of day. Let everybody talk about it. Let's engage in a mid-course correction, to use the scientific jargon. But that is the approach. Most important of all, if we're to succeed, if Rotary, if you are to succeed in really having an impact on the developing world in the area of safe water and sanitation, this perhaps is most important of all. Win-win solutions. This is where the four-way test really applies. Thank you very much.